So while I was preparing for This Week in Tumblr as a stand-in for Benny while he was on vacation, I actually came across lavenderprivilege.tumblr.com initially and felt that it warranted a separate examination because of their multiple claims here. Surprisingly enough, they provide links. We're going to start with this is Pixie, a 23-year-old Jewish lesbian, and this is their side blog. There's no actual other information that I've been able to find on this person. I haven't been able to find their other blog or find any kind of bio. They are kink critical, they are anti-porn. I presume this makes them a sex negative feminist. Until I have proof otherwise, I will continue to assume so. To move on to the meat of the matter, they received an anonymous ask, which is frankly somewhat aggressive and clearly indicates some bias. I don't think you know what masochism is. It's when someone enjoys pain. BDSM is always between two consenting adults. Do some fucking research. To which their response is, of course I know what masochism is. I used to be into BDSM. Don't come into my ask box and condescend like I don't know what I'm talking about. I literally have an entire tag called Kink Critical. I've done my research. Then they trigger warn for the links they provide. Now, like I said, this is unusual. They are providing links. As we examine the links, you'll understand why I'm not particularly fond of their links. But moving down, we also have these kinds of idiotic dismissals from anons who assume that our critique of BDSM comes from a lack of experience. Actually, that's May. That's somebody else, who apparently has also done a considerable amount. I may touch on them again later, as they also provide 3 links, which, again, unusual. But let's move on to examine the links that Lavender Privilege has provided us. So, to begin with, you're 50% more likely to be raped if you're in the BDSM scene. So, moving on to that, they've linked to another blog. This blog sort of troubles me because apparently they use predator alert tools, and if you don't use that, you're a predator, which is a presumptuous statement. It's a little bit misanthropic. But they do, in fact, link to something that can be considered a study. The National Coalition of Sexual Freedom, which is apparently a PR group for BDSM in general, published results from a survey they did about consent. And they had over 5,000 respondents. And in that study, they found that over 30% of the over 5,000 respondents had their previously negotiated limit violated. Now let's return to Lavender and see what she said. You're 50% more likely to be raped if you're in a BDSM scene. Well, previously negotiated limit violation is not rape. It can include rape, but it can also include things like we're having a BDSM scene in which I'm going to be spanked. And I have specified that I am comfortable with being spanked on the buttocks. And the individual then, mid-scene, chooses to begin spanking me on the backs of the legs or begins another form of impact play. That is a breach of a previously negotiated limit. That is not in any way, shape, or form sexual assault or rape. It's a breach of a negotiated limit. So we're already not looking good here, Lavender. So we're going to move on a little bit further here, and we're going to discover that the New York Times reports that rape is about 20% self-reported within the general population, which is the famous 1 in 5 number. So we'll get to that in a second. We're actually going to look at the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom study, which right here you have the box for key findings on consent violations. Question 1. Have you ever had a pre-negotiated limit violated in a BDSM scene or relationship? So this presumes that it's either within a specific scene, which may or may not include a long-term partner or a partner that you're familiar with, or within a DS dynamic relationship. So they did not have 5,000 respondents for this question. They had 4,100 and change. They were missing just over 1,500 of them, but they do in fact report a 30% incidence of consent violation. Again, consent violation does not mean rape. We're not sure what context the term pre-negotiated limit violated encompasses. We don't have any data on what that includes. That could be anything from I want to kiss you, but I don't want to French kiss you, and then you force me to take a little tongue. It's forced kissing. You can argue it's sexual assault. It depends heavily on the context of the action. So we're going to come back to Maybe Days, and we're going to examine her link about New York Times reports as 20%, because this is actually a very good link. So right here, by definition, 1% of women surveyed reported being raped in the previous year, a figure that suggests 1.3 million American women annually may have been victims of rape or attempted rape. The figure is significantly higher than previous estimates. And to be honest, one rape is too many. They also indicate that 188,380 Americans were the victims of sexual violence the previous year. And only 84,767 of the assaults were definable as rape as reported in 2010. However, this article also goes on to point out 1 in 7 men have experienced severe violence at the hands of an intimate partner, and 1 in 71 men, between 1 and 2%, have been raped, many when they were younger than 11. So, coming back to Lavender, there's no 1 in 5 rape number for women indicated in that. And consent violation does not equate to rape. And you're completely ignoring the fact that men are some portion of that respondent group in that study. So you're really not looking good now. You're really, really reaching already. So let's move on to link 2. Kinksters fetishize rape and blame sexual assault victims. So this link here takes us to Jezebel, in which a member of FetLife, which is an online community-run social network for individuals involved in kink and fetish. This woman, Dana, was assaulted on Halloween, and it doesn't specify what year. The article is from 2012, so one presumes that being that it's from early November in 2012, that it occurred Halloween of 2012. She was walking in a populated campus area in Belfast, Ireland, on her way to a bar, sober, dressed in men's clothing, and she was approached by a gaggle of revelers who asked her what she was dressed up as. To bring it down to a relatively contained story, one man in particular, who may or may not have been drunk, it's not indicated, clearly did sexually assault her. He grabs her wrists. She pulls away. He grabs one of her breasts, pulls her closer, and begins to lick her face when she refuses to kiss him because she hasn't dressed up. This is clearly a sexual assault. There's really no quibbling about that. She does indicate that she struggled. She was being loud, shrill, and panicky, and that 2 women who happened to be passing by did nothing to assist. She then goes on to invoke rape culture. I'm so angry that people still try and deny rape culture exists as a pervasive, damaging, unacceptable part of our society. Well, nowhere in your story do you mention that you've gone to the police at any time, which is something I would suggest for anyone who experienced anything even remotely like what you're describing. And that's a large part of what the responses are. The responses that apparently victim blame and apparently place all of the onus on the victim. There is an onus on people to mitigate the possibility of victimization, regardless of the form of it. This goes back to the don't lock your doors, tell burglars not to rob you. Don't look both ways before crossing the street, tell drivers not to strike you in the crosswalk. One of the good comments here is that 2 or more males get together, add alcohol, and a pack mentality emerges. Feminism is not going to fix the mob mentality, and it's not gendered. But it's a very good point that people in groups, and especially drunken people in groups, can be led to act in ways as a group that has no relation to anything they would do normally. This person gets probably the closest to victim blaming when they point out that instead of going to the police, you go off and get plastered to a stupor, clubbing with your friends, and later, after you get home, you get plastered yourself on rum. This tells me much of your problems with alcohol. Which, you know what? I hate to say it, but the person's correct. You shouldn't have gone and gotten drunk. You shouldn't have gone and ignored the fact that law enforcement exists and would have taken your report seriously. And the individual described in her story was wearing a Crayola costume. They would not have been difficult to find in the UK, where there are cameras frequently positioned publicly. The last person is kind of a jerk. No one talks about the fact that you sort of led them on by smiling and laughing. No, I don't think that was leading them on. I think that was you trying, this lady, Dana, that was her trying to diffuse something. That said, Jezebel turns around and conflates this and equates it with Rebecca Watson's horrific account of rampant misogyny in the skeptic community, because asking somebody for coffee, even as a euphemism, and then accepting their polite no and simply going on your way is rape. I mean, that's obvious. We're in a patriarchal culture. Everything is rape, clearly. Now, I have a FetLife account, but I have looked at FetLife and I was unable to find any indication of the story still existing on FetLife. It may have been removed. I'm not certain. They've edited out portions of this story. I don't know why. I haven't seen the original story. I can't speak to what it actually contains. But of the comments they post, very few of these have anything to do with victim blaming. The first one is, why were you not raising a hue and cry? Why were you not kicking the person in the groin and screaming bloody murder and raking at their face? The second one points out that expecting passersby to help you, well, why can't you help yourself? You are responsible for you. Then we have a couple of responses about rape culture that don't even touch on the individual in question. They don't refer to Dana at all. It's simply that your invocation of rape culture is absurd. So, returning to Lavender, Kinksters fetishize rape and blame sexual assault victims. There's nothing in there that is legitimately sexual assault blame or victim blaming. And there's no indication of fetishization. There's nothing there that indicates that any one of those 7 comments was somehow fetishizing a sexual assault or fetishizing a rape. But what do you do, I guess? So moving on to her third link, we have BDSM normalizes abuse. So this is a very long post, and I won't cover it all, but the important parts here are, where were we here? If we're going to talk about the normalization of abuse through BDSM, then we cannot avoid talking about 50 Shades of Grey. I don't care if it doesn't depict BDSM exactly to a T, because film is never going to completely replicate life. Here's the issue. 50 Shades of Grey, as a book, does not even vaguely represent consensual BDSM. It's got nothing to do with safe, sane, healthy, consensual BDSM in any way, shape, or form. It would have been more honestly titled 50 Shades of an Abusive, Sociopathic, Narcissistic Stalker and a Naive, Easily Manipulated Virgin. That's the book. That's coming from me. I have over a decade of experience in the local BDSM community and in BDSM relationships. So, claiming that BDSM and sex sells are demonstrable through pointing at 50 Shades of Grey is frankly absurd, because you know what? 50 Shades of Grey was a fanfic of a fanfic of a fanfic. And the fanfic it is based off of, Twilight, sells males as sexual objects too. I mean, whatever teams they were, Edward and Llama Boy, Llama Boy runs around shirtless for how much of the time? And there are women who rampantly objectified him. So I'm going to include the links to these simply because, I mean, this is a very long post, but a little bit more down at the bottom that we need to touch on is, overall, there isn't a lot of research done into BDSM circles due to what happens in the bedroom stays in the bedroom mentality. And kinksters assume that their private sex lives are unrelated to broader society. You just have to see the prevalence of BDSM clubs, nightclubs, online communities, and even here on Tumblr. Okay, in my local area, there are really two primary kink groups that exist, or BDSM groups that are both, they're not associated with FetLife.com, but they host material on FetLife.com. And they don't actually have a private club. They rent space locally that they use for private dungeon nights that are very well supervised by people who have been trained as monitors. I'm not sure how nightclubs plays into this. The online communities, I mean, there's FetLife, there's Reddit. Are you saying that people shouldn't be able to find other people with common interests? Because then we need to get rid of all the feminists hooking up on Tumblr and having their little circle squirts. And they did point out, even on Tumblr, it seems that most people have some sort of kink. The issue is that kink culture does normalize, sexualize, glorify abuse. All right, since we're going to hammer on that word abuse, let's define it. Abuse. Use something to bad effect or for a bad purpose. Misuse. Second one. Treat a person or animal with cruelty, violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. So, that second definition right there, that one, that implies a lack of consent. If we're going to go back and look at this, we're going to see that it's sexual, it normalizes, sexualizes, and glorifies abuse. Well, abuse is non-consensual. We're going to go back to that definition. Safe, sane, healthy, consensual. Consensual is one of the four letters in that initialization, or initialism, sorry. If you don't have informed consent, yes, you're right, it is abuse. But if you have informed consent, it's a fetish or a kink. It's part of a DS dynamic. It's part of a DS encounter. I'm sorry that you don't understand this concept of personal agency and personal informed consent, and you somehow see it as a problem. And then going back to the what happens in the bedroom stays there mentality. Well, when the government makes attempts to legislate female reproductive services and health, the feminists are understandably upset that their bodily integrity and their bodily autonomy is being infringed upon. Well, what happens in my house amongst consenting adults is no concern of radical feminists or anyone else, to be frank, because you are infringing on the bodily autonomy of consenting adults, adults that are discussing and informing themselves and then giving consent. So we're going to go back and look at Lavender, and BDSM normalizes abuse. I think you're struggling here. So we're going to, again, go back to Rad Female, who is a comprehensive post on why kinks are harmful. And this one's a doozy. It is the first link from, or the last link that we just did. Kink culture eroticizes rape and blames rape victims. Conflating, that's the Jezebel article, that's conflating a sexual assault, a clear sexual assault, in fact, with rape. Kink culture trivializes sexual violence, which is a link to feminist current. I'm just going to explain these. I'm not actually going to go through them. I don't really have time. This would get to be a long video, but I believe radfemale.tumblr.com might get her own little examination. Kink culture is racist, which I think in and of itself, I'm not the person to explore that perhaps, but I think it's something that deserves exploring as a statement because I'm not sure that it is racist. Kink culture reaffirms the gender binary and misogynistic power imbalances, which is a link to another blog post by radfemale.tumblr.com, which is a terrible citation. You don't cite yourself, ever. That's not how academic citation works. And the other problem with that is that I'm familiar with my own BDSM community, and I don't presume to know the exact ratios of individuals who are non-binary or who are in non-heteronormative relationships, but they are visibly represented within the group that I have most frequently participated in. There are femdoms that participate in DS dynamics in which there is cuckoldry, forced feminization, sissification, service and submission dynamics. I mean, that's not a misogynistic power imbalance if it's a long-term relationship. That is a female being dominant over a male. Kink culture benefits from degrading and humiliating women. Again, referring back and citing themselves. Femdoms still perpetuate misogyny because apparently being a female dominant is not about finding somebody who is a male submissive. It is about enacting male dominance on a male in a way that somehow sort of, I mean, really, like, you're stretching. Apparently femdoms having male submissives are reenacting patriarchal oppression of females, but they're gender inverting it. I guess. I don't know. Like I said, we're going to get to this person later. It appropriates consent. No, it doesn't. And again, you're citing yourself. So, a little further down, BDSM also kills women. Ironically, the two examples cited are actually of one man who dies and one man who ends up in a coma. And then we go on with oh, well, kinksters are ignorant and selfish and sadistic and manipulative, and so are people. That's not specific to kinksters. That's not specific. Lawyers are ignorant, selfish, sadistic, and manipulative. Some of them are, for sure. You're claiming that these particular traits right here are not indicative of some number of humans in general. The irony implicit in this statement, however, it's bully tactics to silence the opposition because they know what they're doing isn't morally right. Wow! There is some serious cognitive dissonance there, Madam Rad Female. Kink shaming is exactly a bully tactic to silence the opposition. I don't like what you're doing, so you should stop because reasons. And then they go on to claim that an erect dick does not limit your intellectual capacity. Because apparently only guys have kinks, I guess. Let's go back to Lavender. Take another look. So, thus far we've gotten through 4, and they've not made a strong case. BDSM practices literally kill women. So we're going to go and look at this one. Get ready for this one. This is literally a screen cap of some Google search, and there's no indication of what the Google search is. They've not included that in their screenshot. So there's no context here. It's just stories of men who have been involved in a sexual encounter, and then apparently a woman has died during it. And yes, this is all horrific. Let's get that out of the way. The fact that anybody died at all is horrific, and I don't have any further context to say anything about these. I could look them up, but that's not going to be covered now, simply. And then we get down to the bottom, and we see somebody's commented, but fetishizing violence is totally safe, sane, and consensual. Why do you hate male doms? Why can't you just shut up and let people have their kinky times? Whine, 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 whine. Well, here's the thing. You are completely ignoring non-binary, non-heteronormative relationships. So you're throwing a lot of people under the bus, completely ignoring the fact that BDSM is this giant umbrella of kinks and fetishes and relationship dynamics that are not exclusively male-led, and they do not exclusively require impact play or knife play or any kind of sharp play. It includes bondage and a whole host of other things. There are some relationships that do not even have any form of impact play whatsoever. They are simply a relationship dynamic, but because one individual is dominant, one individual is subservient, it is a DS dynamic. It is covered under BDSM. And seriously, you do need to let people have their kinky times and shut your noise hole because, frankly, it's none of your damn business. If they're not including you, what goddamn difference does it make? So let's return one more time to Lavender, and let's just settle this right here and now, Pixie. You are just not very good at citing. You're better at it than radfemale.tumblr.com. However, several of the things that you make statements about or you make claims to are clearly not within the citations, or they are completely disproved by the citations. They're nowhere to be found within a couple of them, and there's massive cherry picking here. You know what? You're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to say, I've been involved in BDSM for however long, I've experienced these things. But interestingly, if I, as a cis-het white male, the exemplar of patriarchal oppression, that oppressor that gender studies professors warn you about, were to make any statement that encapsulated you as a lesbian or you as a member of any group, any identity, you would be up my ass screaming about me speaking over you and me speaking for you and being not allowed to. It's simply, I'm not allowed to. But you're taking it upon yourself to speak over and for people that are consenting adults. Where abuse exists, it should be rooted out. And within BDSM, the community is vigilant. I have seen cases where people have gone to community leaders or event leaders and explained that events have occurred that were clearly repeated attempts at violation of consent, or frankly, just single instances of a violation of consent that was not even egregious, just there. It was just a violation of consent. And it was not rape. It was just breaching personal space or ignoring set limits or ignoring safe words or safe codes or safe signals. And the people responsible for those breaches have been removed from the community, and they are not welcome within the community. And that probably is a problem because those people are now in a situation where they're unsupervised and can take advantage of the uninformed and uninitiated. So your stigmatization is actually going to cause more issues, because just like when abortions are made illegal, the abortions go underground and the complication and death rate goes up massively because the abortions are no longer being done safely or in a controlled, sterile manner. Telling everybody that they can't have their kink means that you run the risk of BDSM going underground and becoming unsafe. Have your opinion, but don't push it like you're proselytizing on a soapbox on a corner, telling the world that they're all heathens and they're all going to suffer and they're just dragging society to hell in a handbasket. I don't know what you think you know, but I do think you need to open your eyes and realize that being an agency-denying, consent-denying, misanthropic, ignorant bigot is not serving any useful purpose. It's got nothing to do with equality. It's got nothing to do with feminism. It's you being a bigot that said, I don't like what you're doing. Stop it!